This big guy was bawling. People rushed over. They pointed their guns at him. Beside the big guy, two girls had already stopped breathing. The girl's father gave him a beating. The big guy didn't resist. Instead, he said with his mouth, "I was too late." He had a hunting rifle against his jaw. He was arrested on charges of murder and transferred to the prison full of death row prisoners. The big guy weighed 330 pounds. His weight made the car's chassis drop low. The moment he got out of the car and landed on the ground with his two giant feet, the whole car bounced up twice. Everyone had to look up at him. One of the prison guards was the mayor's brother. He held onto the big guy's handcuffs and kept shouting, "The death row inmate has arrived." The warden told him to shut up and not to provoke the prisoner. With his size, if he caused trouble, even 5 or 6 prison guards would have a hard time dealing with him. The warden slowly looked up. This 7 feet 6 inches big guy actually had a kind-looking face. The mayor's brother was very arrogant, and he used a stick to hit him. "Get in there quickly." The warden confirmed the prisoner's information. The big guy was named Coffey. He suddenly asked the warden, "Will the lights be turned off at night? I'm very afraid of the dark." The warden looked incredulous. That a 330-pound roughman like him would actually be afraid of the dark. The warden told him that the lights in the hallway would be on at night. Coffey was relieved at that. He reached out to shake hands with the warden, and the other prison guards were worried that he might break the warden's hand. Warden looked at Coffey's clear eyes and shook hands with him. Coffey didn't seem like a terrible criminal. What had he done? The warden looked up Coffey's profile. He was suddenly startled. This guy raped and killed 2 8-year-old girls. The warden could hardly believe it. Hundreds of villagers found him in the woods. Coffey was covered in blood at the time, with the girls' bodies lying at his feet. The warden was perplexed. Coffey didn't seem like that kind of person. This was Cold Mountain Prison in the United States, where all the prisoners were charged with serious offenses. When death row inmates were executed, the prison guards would shave their heads, have them sit in the electric chair, place a wet sponge on top of their heads, and put on the electric helmet for them. When the time comes, the electric switch was activated, and the electric current, like a bullet, quickly penetrated the brain. The prisoner would feel little pain, and then meet the end of their day. The passage from the cell to the execution site, known as the Green Mile, was painted green. Though this was a death row cell, the prison guards were just and never mistreated the inmates. Except for the mayor's brother, he frequently beat the death row inmates. A single blow was enough to break their fingers. He relied on his relationship with his mayor brother, and threatened other prison guards, saying, "If you ever upset me, I'll make sure you can't survive in this city." Soon, a new death row inmate arrived. His name was Samson. He was involved in a triple homicide during a robbery, including killing a pregnant woman. Samson appeared quite simple-minded, leading the prison guards to let their guard down. However, Coffey sensed something amiss and warned the warden to be cautious. This inmate was a serial killer. Upon entering the prison, he attacked a guard from behind, then used handcuffs to subdue another guard. The warden tried to apprehend Samson, but got kicked in his main part, leaving him unable to stand. The usually arrogant the mayor's brother was momentarily stunned. Thankfully, the deputy warden arrived in time. He knocked Samson out with a blow. After Samson was settled, the warden knelt on the ground, clutching his groin. It turned out he had a severe bladder infection. When he usually went to pee, he always faced difficulty despite his efforts. He often lost sleep at nights due to the pain. When he went downstairs to use the bathroom, he would be taken to the ground by the pain before reaching the bathroom. Then he had to pee right on the spot. His infection tormented his body constantly, causing him to sweat profusely every time he urinated. Seeing the warden suffering, Coffey called for him. When the warden approached him, he began to take action. Coffey grabbed the warden, who was terrified and considered reaching for his gun. Surprisingly, Coffey reached for his groin, causing him to freeze in fear. What if Coffey hurt his groin? The nearby inmates, alarmed by the situation, began shouting, "Help! He's trying to murder the boss." At that very moment, an unbelievable event occurred. The lights in the cell slowly started to brighten, becoming increasingly intense until they burst. Coffey released the warden, who sat on the bed, coughing violently. 3 seconds later, Coffey opened his mouth, and thousands of black bugs flew out, gradually disappearing into the air. Warden was shocked by what he had just witnessed. He stared wide-eyed and asked Coffey why he touched him in that way. Coffey responded by saying, "I healed it. I'm very tired." Then he lay down on his bed. The warden slowly got up. He went to the bathroom and started peeing. He hadn't felt this good in a long time. His inflammation had miraculously been cured. Upon returning home, he quickly told this to his wife. The two of them made love 4 times that night. The warden couldn't believe that Coffey was a murderer, so he sought out a lawyer to defend Coffey. However, the lawyer turned out to be a racist who couldn't uncover the truth. To show his gratitude to Coffey, the warden offered him a loaf of bread baked by his wife, but Coffey shared the bread with an elderly inmate, David, who had a pet mouse that could perform tricks on a spinning wheel. The mayor's brother despised the mouse and frequently contemplated to kill it. This inmate was truly terrible. He spat in the warden's face, urinated at the prison guards, and even spat cookies onto a guard's face. His behavior was excessively audacious. The guards used a high-pressure water hose to spray Samson. Then they restrained and locked him in solitary confinement for 3 days. On his first day after being released from solitary confinement, the mayor's brother happened to pass by. Samson quickly grabbed him and kissed on his face. He wanted to make out with him. His hand even started touching the mayor's brother's butt. The mayor's brother wouldn't dare to resist. Fortunately, other prison guards intervened. However, the mayor's brother's pants were stained with yellow liquid. He had actually peed himself out of fear. David taunted him for bullying the weak but fearing the strong. The mayor's brother threatened everyone not to talk about him wetting his pants. Then, he found an opportunity and broke David's fingers with a single blow. In fact, David was about to be executed. He intended to entrust his mouse to the warden. However, at that moment, the mouse ran out. It was crushed by the mayor's brother with a single kick. David was devastated, as the mouse was his only source of solace. At this point, Coffey reached out his hand. Has anyone ever witnessed a resurrection? Coffey indicated that he could revive the mouse. The warden handed the mouse to Coffey. He covered it with both hands and blew into it. Astonishingly, the mouse's tail began to move. With a burst of golden light, Coffey started coughing violently. He opened his mouth, and countless flies flew into the air and gradually disappeared. The prison guards looked at Coffey in amazement. The mouse had actually come back to life. It was truly a Green Mile miracle. The warden and the deputy warden pushed the mayor's brother to the electric chair. They told him they would allow him to preside over one execution as he willed, but afterward, he would have to leave. They warned that if he didn't leave, they would definitely do something to him, even at the risk of losing their jobs. The mayor's brother agreed. Coincidentally, it was time to execute David. The mayor's brother deliberately didn't wet the sponge while harboring resentment. At the site of the electric chair execution, a sponge was placed on top of the inmate's head, and a black hood was covered over his head. With a command, the electric switch was turned on. The inmate should experience instant brain death as usual, and passed away without pain. However, this time, David let out a shrill, agonizing scream. Smoke started to come out of him. The warden realized the sponge was dry, but it was too late. Inside the cell, Coffey seemed to empathize with the pain. He started twitching while shouting in pain. Stopping at this point would only increase David's suffering. So, the warden tearfully ordered to continue with electric execution. David was burnt and began to catch fire. Everyone present was terrified. They were shoving and pushing each other while trying to leave. The prison guards were furious, as this was a cruel way to execute someone. The mayor's brother simply said that he didn't know the sponge needed to be wet. The deputy warden couldn't contain himself and started beating him, but it was too late. David had already passed away. The warden visited his retired boss. He learned that his boss's wife had a brain tumor. The warden decided to let Coffey try to help. He, along with his subordinates, incapacitated Samson and locked the mayor's brother in solitary confinement. The two troublemakers were contained. They left through the back door with Coffey, who they now trusted. He was not handcuffed and was ecstatic, behaving like a child. He picked up and smelled the soil. The warden unexpectedly brought a prisoner out to help with his boss. When they arrived at the doorstep, he came out with a gun. The warden assured him not to worry. He explained that they came to save his wife. Coffey showed no fear and slowly approached. He seemed to sense the pain of the patient. He entered the house and kissed the boss's wife. The boss was somewhat bewildered. He asked why they had brought this big man to cuckold him in person. At that moment, a white light flashed. The entire house trembled. The wife expelled the illness from her mouth, and Coffey absorbed it all. She gradually regained her complexion, appearing as if she was 20 years younger. Coffey coughed violently, but this time, he didn't expel any flies. As a token of gratitude, she gave Coffey a necklace symbolizing peace. Back at the prison, Coffey saw an opportunity and spat all the flies into the mayor's brother's mouth. He looked dazed and walked to Samson's cell. Unexpectedly, he took out a gun and shot Samson dead without warning. The prison guards hurriedly put the mayor's brother down. At that moment, the flies flew out of his mouth. The warden asked Coffey why he did this. Coffey reached out and held his hand. He transferred some of his abilities to him. The warden saw some images. He realized that the two little girls were not killed by Coffey, but by Samson. When Coffey arrived, it was already too late. Coffey felt the pain of the world every day, but he couldn't redeem many people. The warden shed tears. For now, he felt the same. The mayor's brother was placed in a mental hospital. It was soon Coffey's turn to be executed in the electric chair. The warden knew Coffey was innocent. He asked him what he wanted to eat or do. In reality, He was asking if Coffey wanted to be set free. Coffey said he didn't want to stay in this world anymore. He could feel the suffering of every person, which was an unbearable burden for him. He couldn't save many people. Ending his life would be a relief. Coffey's final wish before the execution was to watch a movie called Heaven. In the movie theater, Coffey smiled for the first time. Coffey, the wrongfully accused prisoner, was to be executed. On the execution day, Coffey was cheerful, but the prison guards had gloomy faces. As soon as Coffey entered the execution chamber, he felt the overwhelming hatred directed at him. People believed he was a child-killing villain, but only the prison guards knew that Coffey was a good person. Coffey sat on the electric chair. He asked the warden not to put a hood on him, because he was afraid of the dark. Despite breaking the rules, the warden agreed. As everything was ready, Coffey faced his death with calmness. The guards standing nearby couldn't hold back their tears. When the time came, the warden struggled to give the execution order. He approached Coffey, held his hand, bid him farewell with tear-filled eyes. Then he choked with tears while commanding the execution. Coffey remained silent, but the light bulbs in the chamber burst one after another. In a shower of sparks, Coffey, the angel, returned to heaven. Afterward, the warden left the prison. Many years later, he shared the story with an old lady, but she couldn't believe it. The warden took her to a cabin in the woods. Inside of a box in the cabin, a mouse climbed out. It was the same mouse from David, and it was still alive. When Coffey saved the mouse, he transferred some of his abilities to it. Both the mouse and warden had now lived for 108 years. The warden had been experiencing the suffering of humanity as Coffey had, with the people around him passing away one by one, leaving him alone in the world. When Coffey came into the world, he had no idea it was filled with pain. He was afraid of the darkness, but what he truly feared was the darkness in human nature. God had given him a unique ability, destined for him to endure 100-fold of suffering. While death might be the most terrifying thing for ordinary people, for Coffey, it was a relief. Kind and evil actions all have their consequences. Only the kind-hearted deserve redemption. This film is called The Green Mile. Here is the question for this episode. Do you think Coffey is an angel? If you think he is, please comment 111. If you don't, please comment 222. Seeing Coffey being executed deeply saddened K. He is obviously wrongfully convicted, yet it is impossible to overturn his case. Even his lawyer is a racist who didn't help him. Warden is a good person who would take Coffey's place and protect the last vestiges of human goodness. This is an excellent film, and I recommend watching the original. That's it for this episode. Remember to like and subscribe. See you next time. Bye.